Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts. Today I'm going to build this King Hauler. Completely build it in one day. I'm going to start at 8 in the morning. I'm going to build till I'm done. And I'm going to do something that I've been getting a lot of requests for. I'm going to build it designed for beginners. I get so many people say, I'm not interested in crawlers, I'm not interested in race cars, but I really like the Tamiya semis. Do you think I could build it as my very first RC kit? Absolutely, you can build it as your very first RC kit. So I'll go through, I'll show you how to interpret Tamiya instructions, and we'll get this baby built and running in a day. So here we go.
When you open a Tamiya kit, every kit they make, they're beautifully packed. And what I usually do when I build these is I unpack everything at once because the packing is kind of a pain because it's so good. The tires are in this box here. So I will generally open the boxes and just remove the parts. So let's look at that for a second. Got a large number of tires here. Set those aside. More tires. Then we have our parts bags. Now the parts bags also include thread lock, very important, you will use that. Ceramic grease, the wrench, and the Allen wrench. And then you can see they're labeled. Some of them have a letter label. So I do the, like I said, I'll throw the D's in the D pan here. And I'll go ahead and unpack these and we'll look at the next box. So one other part of note, it's this little bag right here with the paper in it. And this is in all the new King Hauler kits. And what it is a note to use these longer set screws in a couple of areas, notably the gear shafts for the rear end and the back of the transmission. The reason for that is they cut a deeper flat on the shaft so that the standard screws were too short and they wouldn't hold good in the gear. So I take these and open them up and dump them in the E bin, which is where the grub screws go. But it's real easy to build the kit and not find these. So you want to make sure you leave these out. You could even tape them in your manual in the appropriate place. And I'll discuss that when we get to this. So now I've got that box completely opened up. We'll grab this next box here. And this one has a lot of plastic trees in it. And it's got this plastic top that it's one of the nastiest things to open you'll ever see. So we'll open this up. I just use my good old X-Acto knife again. I cut all these open at once. Throw them in the bread pan. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this all open. Move on to the next part. Alright, so I have all the parts out of that. Stuffed in my tin. That is a royal pain. And all these plastic trees, plastic bags that come in these boxes, I do the same thing. I open them all up and I just throw them in the box that the kit came in. So I'll get these all opened up. So I opened up those parts bags. The remaining parts in this kit now are the body And the chrome pieces, they're also plastic bagged. The windshields. And then down here in the bottom, the instruction manual, the decal sheet. So I'm going to open up the rest of these, put them in this box, which will be my tray for building. And then we'll get started, go through the instructions a little bit, and I'll show you how to put this thing together. I've got my instructions here ready to use. I've got 3 muffin tins full of parts and a bread pan full of parts. So unboxing this kit took half an hour, 8:30. Alright, getting this done in one day might be a challenge, but we're going to work on it. So I want to talk a little bit about Tamiya instructions. They are the best instructions in the business. And that's why when people ask me, could I build one of these semis for my first kit, I say yes, because if you follow the instructions carefully, there is no reason why you can't build one of these kits just perfectly. I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks, but the first tip is over here on the left side. They show every single part in a full-size drawing. And they tell you what screw bag it's in. So this nut is in screw bag A. So we can find screw bag A here. I use my little tweezers. And I'll pull that nut out. And I can lay it on the drawing to make sure it's correct. Now with the nuts it's easy. But the screws, it's a little bit more difficult. So this is a screw bag B. So we can find a screw and we can lay it on there. And we can find another screw. And this one is the correct one. This one is too long. So you just got to be a little bit careful. But just match up the parts to the drawing. Plus it tells you the quantity. So it says this screw BB3, we need 1 of them. The X1 there. This little nut we need 1. This screw we need 1. So on and so forth. So you can go right through and lay every part on the drawing to make sure you've got the right piece. And they show the bushings and pretty much all the small parts. And they tell you what bag they were in. That's a great thing about Tamiya instructions. The second great thing is in the back here. They show every sprue tree. So for example, this sprue here, A, and it shows the parts on it. So if you're hunting for a part and you can't find it, you can match up the picture here with the sprue tree and figure out which part is which. Now, I know these kits so well I don't use this, but it is very handy. Those are a couple ways to use the Tamiya instructions. They do have writing in English and Japanese, but you don't really need that. Their pictures are so good. I want to talk a little bit about cutting the parts off the sprues. That's what these flat bladed side cutters are for. I'm going to use a different set I had, but you just take this, put the flat side against the part, clip it off. I'm going to clip these off because they're very hard to mistake for anything else. Okay, so we've got those cut off. Now, when you cut those off, there's still a little bump here, particularly on this one because it was hard to get down in there with the sprue cutters. So I always take my X-Acto knife and clean off the remaining little bit. So that the case is smooth. This is just part of being a tidy and neat model builder. You really want to make your models stand out from everybody else's, then that's the kind of thing you do. You just do the little stuff. So every part you cut off a sprue, you're going to have to cut it off, and then you're going to have to go back and trim up the part where the sprue came off. And it's especially important on some of the parts like these gears. These are a real hard nylon. And when you cut these off, I'll cut one off. I've got really super high quality sprue cutters, but you can probably see there's a bump left there. And this gear works by another gear fitting into here, and those bumps will interfere. So in this part, it's actually mandatory to cut these off and do a nice job or your transmission won't work right. So that's a little bit about taking the parts off the trees. I'll come back and we'll get started. Our first step in building is preparing the servos. So you do need to have the servos pretty much when you get the kit started. This is a sprue E, the letter E molded in here. And so we're going to need to figure out which of these parts we need for our servos. And the difference is they have different splines in them. And there's basically two different types of servo splines. So really the only way to do it is just to test if it fits on the splines or not. And that one fits and that one doesn't. Okay. That one fits. So there's our two bases for the servos. I'll clip out the rest of the parts and then we'll put this together. I've got my little parts I need for this operation clipped out. Now this servo adapter says Futaba Tamiya on the bottom. You probably can't see it on screen. It's molded into the plastic. So what that means is I follow the instructions for the Futaba and Tamiya one, which means I use screw BC7. So BC7 is in screw bag C. And that's it right there. So that's the screw I'm going to use. The second thing you want to do, boy, I'm sorry for the lighting on this. These black parts are hard. Is make sure that this is going to be centered on the servo. Now I use an electronic device to check, but you can easily do that by dropping this onto the servo. And you can see it has a little bump here. We're going to rotate it and see if it goes about the same way in both directions. It goes more that way and less that way. So what we want to do, so that makes the center about right there. And we're going to recenter it. Now this is not super critical, we can change it later, but you want to get it as close as possible. So we've got that centered with our little bump facing in. We put this little ring on. We put this part on. Now, probably going to be important to put the little ball in here first. And the ball is this one, which is that part there. So I'll get that put together. Actually, I'll do that one on screen because we'll give you an idea how we do all this. So I take the little nut, drop it in this holder. Great feature of Tamiya kits is that is encapsulated. Now the second thing I want to do then is add some thread lock. Kit comes with thread lock. I'll basically thread lock everything where a metal piece goes into a metal piece. So this is a metal stud going into a metal nut. Needs to be thread locked. If it's screwing into plastic, you don't need to thread lock it. Screwing into a metal piece like a nut, thread lock it. Use our little Tamiya wrench, tighten it up, drop that on. We use this plastic washer and our screw. Okay, that servo's prepped. I'll do the other one. Move to the next step. Our prepped servos look like this. The shift servo has got the arm sticking up. Steering servo has the arm sticking back. I actually did need to replace that smaller screw with the bigger one, the BB3 instead of the BC7, because the hole in this servo is a little larger. And the same with this one. And every servo is different. You'll just have to figure that out. So these are done. We have to mount them in the servo mounts and start prepping to build the chassis. So I'll get those parts out. Here's our servo block all put together. Notice the orientation of the servo arms and the fact that Tamiya has you put these screws on the outside holes and these on the inside holes. These aren't super tight, so I can wiggle this as I put it in. I'm going to clip out the front and rear bumper holders. And this rear stay. This stay mounts together like this. You can see it in this step right here, and uses screw BF1. Now BF1 is in the F bag, and we will be using a ton of these in this next step because these are the screws that hold the frame together. So we'll also be using these cross members right here. Clip one of those off. Cross member has a gusset on the top, but not the bottom. So when you put these in, you want to make sure that you get that gusset facing up. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and trim these up, cut them all out, and we'll put the frame together. I've got my rear frame piece put together. This front bumper, it's important to note that you're supposed to push these two nuts into here. So I've done that, and it's a good idea to do it because it's a very difficult place to get to afterwards. So now we're going to build this frame, which is basically the two frame rails and then all these cross pieces. Frame rails come covered with a plastic film covering that you have to remove, and they're stamped with an L and an R for left and right. We'll peel the covering off one of these. And then we're going to go right down the line, boom, 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 and mount these in. So the first one is our front bumper support. And almost all the screws for this are BF1, which makes it easy to grab them. So we're going to start with this one. the way I like to do this is to go down and mount all the pieces on one rail first. So I'm going to mount this here, and this one here. Notice I'm putting the web up. So I'm going to go ahead and mount those. There's my frame with the servos mounted, all the cross pieces mounted, and the front and rear bumper mounts mounted. The next piece to mount is this rear cross member. I just saved that separately because you get to use a metal bracket on the outside. So it takes a longer screw, and I just wanted to point that out. So it's actually using BB3, which is in screw bag B. And I believe, is this little devil? Yes, it is. Because of the thickness of the metal, they use a slightly longer screw. And then down below, they use a BF1, which is the same screw as everything else we just did. Anyway, I know I've got one more screw to put here, but that's our completed half. And so then we will peel the plastic off of this and mount all the screws on this side. So I'll get that done. Okay, I've got my chassis completely put together. Did the other side just like the first side. And this is a pretty good place to step back and go, wow, I did this. Right now it's 9:14, so I've been at it for about an hour and 15 minutes. This is the third chassis I built this week though, so it's, for me, pretty straightforward. So now I'm going to move through and do these accessory brackets and put those on. And some of those have screws that go down into the threaded parts on the metal. And I use Loctite on those. Some of them have screws that go into plastic, and I don't use Loctite. So just remember, if it goes into metal, use Loctite. If it goes into plastic, don't use Loctite. So I'll get those put on, and then I'll be done with this page. One thing that might pop up when you're putting these on, there's two different brackets. There's a curved bracket here that holds the fuel tank and a square bracket that holds the step. The square brackets go in the front, the curved brackets go in the back. But you notice here they're marked F12 and F11, F11 and F12, and you're going to try and figure out, oh no, I cut them out, what's the difference? Well, the difference is they have these two little holes here molded on opposite sides. And that is the only difference in the part. If you mix them up, it doesn't matter, but technically they're supposed to be with these two little holes facing out. So this would mount here. So I've got these holes visible on this side and the holes visible on that side. They're not really holes, they're just marks. So that's the difference in those parts. And you'll notice that they leave the step mounting brackets off on one side, and that's to allow for fitting the transmission at a later step. So I'm going to finish putting these on, move on to the next one. That completes the frame drawings. So I flip the page here. And the next thing are these rear springs. There is nothing remarkable here. I'm just going to go ahead and put this together and show you what it looks like when it's finished. And then we'll install it. I said there was nothing remarkable. about this, but there is one thing I want to mention. This shoulder screw, BB7, there's two different screws in that bag. There's one that has a longer shoulder. BB7 has a shoulder that's shorter. So you want to make sure you get the right one. And Tamiya has made these a different color. I don't know how they do that exactly, but the BB7 is a shinier, almost like a chromier look, and this one is more of a, I don't know, aluminum look. They're both the same material, but they do look different, which makes them easy to grab out of the bag. So you want to make sure you get the right shoulder bolt. Otherwise you'll be going back to change it. The rear suspension just goes together like this. You slide the bushing through. And make sure the nuts are facing in. Just fits through here. Same thing, we'll make sure the nuts are facing in. Slide the bushing on. Tighten that up. Now we're starting to look like a truck. The next thing is going to be to build the differentials. Now I have a separate video on building the differentials. I will put a link to that video in the description. So I'm just going to build these differentials today. The other video shows exactly how to build them. They're not hard, but if you're doing this truck for the first time, it's a great thing to watch. And one thing I am going to do, in the differentials, they use a lot of these bushings. They're made out of sintered bronze. They come with the kit. I normally don't use these when I'm building a kit. I replace them with ball bearings. So you might want to do that. You can order a ball bearing kit for a King Hauler. I usually get them off eBay and they're pretty inexpensive. But you can also use these sintered bronze bushings. If you do, just use the ceramic grease on them and they work just fine, but I prefer ball bearings. So that's the only modification I'm doing to the standard kit today, is using ball bearings instead of bushings. So check out that other video. I'll come back when I have these built. They're right here. And then I'll go through installing them. Alright, and my rear diffs built. They operate nice and smoothly and ready to mount on the truck. So one thing that I want to make a note of is it's very important to get this differential bump on the correct side. What I mean by that is this one, the front diff, goes bump on this side, and this one goes like this, the bump on this side. If you put them on this way, they'll turn in opposite directions, which means your truck won't move very far. So you want to make sure you get those on the correct side. I've already put Loctite on my bolts. They're just sitting here. These feet are threaded. So it should just zip together pretty good. Okay, so the other thing, of course, is these have to face with the holes forward. So I'm going to get those bolted on. There's no big trick to these links, except for one. You'll notice there's a lip right here, and that lip is what goes up against this. So if I were to mount this here, for example, the lip facing out, that's wrong. The short end of the curve mounts up here, and then the lip fits against that bracket. So we use two different lengths of shoulder bolts. The short ones mount up here, and the long ones mount down here. We're not going to mount the long ones yet. We're only going to put all four short ones in and get those put together, and then I'll show you why we do it that way. I've got these links all mounted. Now it's time to put these bottom bolts in. First we have to put in this little propeller shaft, and I like to just put a little grease on it. I've already put some Loctite on these, so I can just slide them through. They're both turning the proper direction. Everything looks good, so we'll bolt those down. The dampers are easy. Maybe you've noticed, but I like to lay out all the parts for each step, so I have them right with me, and I use the instructions to count what I need. I find I build more accurately that way. So on these, you just drop the bushing on, a little spacer, a little bit of grease on it, drop it in the tube. These couldn't be easier. Thread on the bottom. I use something to hold that from turning. Screw that down. The kit comes with black springs and silver springs. There's 6 black springs, and the black springs are what go in the damper. Top threads on. There's a finished unit. So I'll go ahead and build those. Mounting the dampers is easy. Just slide one of these bushings in. Bolt goes through here. Goes through this. Put Loctite on it. There's an alignment pin on this that fits into the chassis. So you can just start the bolt, get it to the right place, tighten it down. And then the shoulder screw goes through here. Lock nut, and all of them mount exactly the same. So I'll go ahead and mount those up. The rear end will be all done. Moving right along on this. Okay, rear end's all done. Suspension works good. Everything turns freely. Chassis is looking very nice. It is now 11 o'clock. So I've been at it for 3 hours. I've got it to this point. This next step, assembling the tie rods, is very easy. You just put the ends on and just start screwing them. You don't have to hold this because they basically self-level depending on how much pressure is on each joint. And Tamiya has given us a full-size drawing of how long it's supposed to be. So you just tighten this down until it's the right length. And we're done. The others are just the same. One thing to note is this this shorter rod is actually in one of the screw bags. It's in screw bag A, not in another place. So if you're looking for it and you can't find it, it's black and it's in screw bag A. Okay, we'll get set up for the next step. The front axle assembly is quite easy. The only thing to note is there is a front and a back. The back mounts this bracket. So I like to mount those before I put the rest of it together, just to remind me. The rest of it is very straightforward after this, pretty much like the rear end, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on the video. Just show you how this fits. Brackets mount like that. The springs, there's a dimple in here for the spring, so it just fits in there like that. The U-bolts on this one go up from the bottom. And the little metal bracket goes on top. And then a nut. Now they don't use lock nuts on this. I actually checked because I thought the lock nuts would look better, but the U-bolts aren't long enough. Up here, the lock nuts wouldn't seat properly. So I'm going to go ahead and assemble that and come back. Well, you can see I went ahead and mounted that front suspension. It's almost identical to the rear end, so nothing really new to learn there. These knuckles, though, the axle fits in here, and then the pin holds it. So you've got to get the pin and the knuckle all lined up. Okay. And then you have to deal with these horrible little E-clips. And you'll have some more of these to do. Worst part of the kit, they're tiny. They shoot off to all corners of the room when you're trying to clip them on. So the way I do it is line up the slot so the clip can just go on there. Oops. Come on, little clip. See what I mean? Okay. I use a pair of needleless pliers to clip them. Ugh. Yeah, nightmare. The tie rod then snaps on, and I use a pair of water pump pliers or something to put them on. They just snap on. And there we have it. There's our steering. Our front end's done. Rear end's done. We're looking like a truck right now. It's about 11:30. Yep, 11:30. And so I'm pleased with our progress so far. Next is the transmission. I will pull the parts out and we'll talk about that. Right now, because this video is turning out so long, I'm going to end this section and I'll do a second part. I I thought I'd be able to edit it out here in production, but I can't because there's too much video that I like. So anyway, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. There's a sneak peek of the finished product. Thanks for watching this video, and look for part 2 almost instantly. Thanks for watching.